as far as our presentation goes today, I'll be looking at specifically tools for BIM managers that we find inside of our CTC tools, all the suites that ATG sells for CTC software. So things that we will be going over today. I'm going to try to keep my PowerPoint extremely short because I don't like them. I always like to stay technical as much as possible. So goals for today is to look at the CTC tools. So we have something from Batch Suite, we have something from the Project Suite, the BIM Manager Suite, and Hive, and then hopefully we'll get to see some more tips and tricks along the way, or after those main four components. So if you're not familiar with those, all of those have a free download and 14-day trial, and there are free tools that you get to keep thereafter. So just as a kind of a quick note that anybody can download these and try them out without having to purchase anything. So, but if you do have questions or you do want to go into an in-depth demo or something like that, we can always pair you up with a salesperson if you don't have one, or just talk to your sales group person at that point, and we can schedule a live demo where your firm gets to pick our brains and find out what these things really do. Most of the time when we do those demos, we'll actually show what end users get to see and what an end user is going to get to have as functionality on their desktop for Revit and some of our other tools. But in this case, I'm trying to pick some things that I've actually used as a BIM manager in the past, and hopefully give you guys some understanding of things you can do with the same set of tools that most of the time the end users are the ones being purchased for. So a little bit of a different perspective on one of like our standard demos that we would do for the products. So that being said, seeking is believing. So I say here in my slide, let's go into Revit now for a quick look at the CTC suites, how they can help BIM managers and those who wear that hat without the official title. So anybody who has that role thrust upon them and they really want to get those tasks done quickly, we're going to try to give you some tools that will help you out. In the ones that are full-time BIM managers, you'll probably see the need for some of these tools in-house based on some of the things I'm going to be showing today. So my little graphic here is my Revit plus time. So now it's Revit time. So let me jump into my Revit screen and we'll get started. So basically I have an open project here. This is a large MEP project with MEP in it. If you're architectural and structural, I'm not really going to focus on the MEP. So everything I'm showing today should apply to all BIM managers across the board. And I'm going to try to keep this in the 30 to 45 minute range, depending on how much I babble. But otherwise, we'll take a look at some of the stuff that's in here. As far as the BIM Batch Suite, which is what I want to show first, it's one of the simpler tools out there. This is a paid tool. Anything that's free, where it says free tools, is a lighter shade, and the darker tools are the ones you get when you have a paid version of it. So essentially, this tool is a project and family upgrader. So the thing that happens a lot of the times, sometimes the CAD manager will actually upgrade a project. Sometimes it'll be the users in the project or the PM that dictates, well, this thing may be going on 3, 4, 5 years or something like that. Second year in, we're going to upgrade it from say 2018 to 2020 or 2021 for compatibility for future. This does have the capability of upgrading projects. Just browse to the folder that you want and then rebuild those files in a new location typically. You could upgrade it in place, but usually you'd want to do that to a new location in case something failed and you still had the old available to you. But the one I want to focus on today is families. In my previous work as a BIM manager and a practice technology leader, basically I would have about 4,000 to 4,500 families across all disciplines. And to upgrade those, usually we would try to do upgrades every 2 years. And so it would be an even year upgrade or an odd year upgrade or something like that. We'd upgrade all of our content from former versions up to newer versions. And because of that, we needed a tool that would actually let us do that. And a lot of times we would write scripts and try to control that in just Windows, where we would open Revit, open the file, save the file in the current new version, and then save it back to the folder location. But that sometimes got a little tricky because it would save it back to the same folder location. So usually we'd have to grab the entire library, put it into, say, the 2020 new library location. Then I've got content in there that's still, say, 2018 while I'm doing my upgrades and running scripts and batches. So for several days or up to a week or something like that, I would usually have some issues of users potentially seeing access and thinking it's all new, and they will test things out and potentially get angry because it's still an older version and things like that. So with the families tab here, we actually do have the ability to look in folders specifically and then add those, including subfolders, into a list. So basically we're writing a script inside of a dialog box to be able to select all of our families and then be able to run that and upgrade them to either a new location or where they were originally. We have the ability of giving them prefixes and suffixes. So if you did have a library where you had, say, a 2018 folder, and I'm currently in 2019 now, so let's just say I'm going to upgrade them all to 2019. If those previous families had like an 18 designation in the file name for some reason to know what the version was, I could actually say I want to add a suffix to that, or do a search for, find, and replace until I want to replace all 18s with 19s. Something like that. So it's a pretty flexible tool to be able to do family migrations and upgrades. And usually with this particular tool, I could upgrade those 4,000 plus families in about 2 days, just doing batches. Usually I'd grab 4 or 5 folders in my library locations and then turn those into a batch, run them, put them in the new finalized location, and then go back and look at the potential errors that might have occurred. Occasionally you'll have a 256 character file name limitation. And the only thing that is kind of a caveat on this particular tool is when it writes the script, it actually has to double the length of the path. So it actually, when it creates from the old to the new, it acts like it's one big long path. So if you have something over like 125, 130 characters, it could give you an error code that says these ones failed because your path was too long. And you know that it's not the Windows limitation of 256 characters. It's actually a limitation within this particular tool that I ran into. In those cases, I just copied those folders and subdirectories to a cleaner place like a C drive location. And then from there, would run the tool and then move those from the temporary location back into my final storage location, and everything was just fine. So usually that happens when you're doing like a pipe library and there's all the fittings of class 150, 300, things like that, that would slow me down. Or if there was like 10 file folders deep of casework types or something like that, sometimes those get a little bit long in the file structure. So to use this tool, basically I'm just going to go to families, go to browse. In this case, instead of going to a normal library, I'm just going to go to my webinar folder and tell it that I want to find files here in this upgrade folder. So if I were to take a peek in this folder for upgrades, basically I've got doors, furniture, and openings. And I've got a couple of things in each. I've got some with type catalogs. Did I just double click that to open it? I hope not. So back to Revit, if I choose this folder to upgrade and say include subfolders, I'm saying okay to that. Now it's giving me a list of everything that was in all the folders. And I can do a check button, check all or check selected. So if I were to only want some of those, I could shift highlight, do a couple of pieces, make sure I get the components that I want, use the check button for selected, or I can just do check all, select them all at once. But then I need to tell it where it's actually going to go to. So in this case, I'm going to go to browse. I'm going to say that this is my 2019 capture folder. Maybe that's my real name for my 2019 library. A lot of times I don't want to necessarily do a conversion and put that directly in the final location. Sometimes I want to validate that I'm getting everything done correctly first and then move it to that final location so it actually knows this is my destination. Depending on whether you think that Revit's file paths on families are embedded in the family, you might want to put them in the final location. If they're not embedded in the family, then it doesn't really matter. But like our central files, obviously you'd want to put that in the real location and turn it into a new central file after detaching and auditing and all that. In the case of families, I don't think that's true. You can move them around at will. And if you have to do an open and file save to a family, usually you'll see in the path that takes you to where it was last saved, even if it's been moved. So that would be one of those areas where you might have that instance where you truly do want to put them in the true final destination, and maybe just make that a hidden folder to everybody until you're done. So lots of ways to do it. I'm just trying to show it well and make sure you guys see what it actually does here. So if I go to my capture folder, that's my true destination. Do I want to create relative subfolders? I mean, it's going to keep the same folder structure that I had before. So if I have one parent folder of all families and I do the entire directory all at once, it theoretically could break if you have thousands of families. So I do smaller folders at one time. But when I do this process, it usually is really clean. If I do 200 to 400 families at a time, it might take me an hour for it to process all those. I think I've got something like 40 of them in this particular group. So I'm just going to hit run and let it do its thing. And it's going to give me a nice little green bar down here. It's going to tell me how far along it is. I believe this is usually going to take about probably 2 minutes or so for 40 families. So we'll continue to chat a little bit over the top of this while it's going. But we even have a tool here that says, do you want to override the preview image using the view with this name? So if all families have say a 3D view in the file and you want it to use that 3D view as the preview image, you can actually check this box and tell it which view inside that dialog. And that will actually use that view. So if you knew you were doing only annotation families and you wanted to only use the floor plan view or a ceiling plan view or something like that from within the family, make sure you do your batches in groups between 3D objects versus 2D objects. If you know it's not going to come out well for some reason, or you've done it in the past, the 3D view isn't very good, you could go back in to open those families up, get a better view, maybe turn it from a wireframe to a shaded or something like that, so you get exactly what you want in the preview image when you load families. So that's just another component of this dialog box that lets you have a little bit of control. There are some third-party tools out there to do the same thing. There's like a $50 tool called Pig, Preview Image Generator. That's not something we sell. It's just a little third-party add-on that also lets you choose those types of scenarios to rebuild all of your preview images for your Revit families. And we also have a tool like that in our Hive CMS solution, which I'm going to go into in just a little while. So this is almost done. So we're going on just over 1.5 minutes, it looks like. I think there's anything else we need to go over inside the dialog box while it's still going. Anytime you're in the CTC Tools, every single tool has up past the options bar here a videos button. So if you try to use the tools and you fail terribly because you just don't know how to use them, we also can do training and whatnot, but the videos here are great helpers. Usually they're videos of under 5 minutes in most cases. So you can click on that, jump right into this CTC library or vault of tools and be able to find out how to use the tool or get a scenario or a method of use so you can better understand the tool, the clicks and the picks and whatnot to be able to make it work. So as this thing finishes, it actually gives us a dialog box that says it did 112 actions and 44 of those were successful. So if you actually kind of read through these, there's the begin processing. A new preview image is needed. The preview will be attempted. So my last object didn't have a preview. It's trying to do that for me, even though I didn't tell it to override the preview image. It's trying to build that for me. So through here, it's telling me what my saved path is, that it was actually successfully upgraded. So each one of these little groups of about 6 or 7 messages are telling me exactly what the family's trying to do as it's being upgraded. And then when we're actually finished, I can scroll down through here. If I had a family that was broken for whatever reason, some of these success windows would say error, and it should actually tell me, what was the error in that case. For a perfect demo, I probably would have liked to have had something like that so I could show that to you. It doesn't happen very often, but occasionally I have a family that's been saved into the library from somebody who somehow got access that shouldn't have, or somebody grabbed something from Revit City and said, hey, throw this in the library for me, and you throw it in there and it's a piece of junk. So cleaning out your libraries and finding ones that were not successful for the upgrades might tell you that you need to delete those families or go fix them before you continue on using that in the library. So that's kind of a view in a nutshell of how to do your family upgrades, library upgrades. In most cases, even the companies that do the every other year will typically now run into, you're in a joint venture with somebody else or something like that, or a subcontractor just came into the fray and they just ordered their first Revit seats and they're trying to catch up or whatnot. So they've got a 2021 seat and your job is 2019. You got to coach them. They got to get that license, and or maybe you've got one that's still 2017. Now they can't get that license because 2021's out, or they have to jump through hoops for it. Little things like that might cause you to upgrade a project or something like that on a non-odd or even year, just so that you're compatible with everybody on the design team. So having a way that you could do thousands of families like this, like I've done in the past, that only takes a day or two to get your entire library upgraded. Way better than leaving them as families that need to be upgraded every time they load them. Usually my kind of biggest fear is that end users will think something is wrong when they load a family. So if I were to go to my insert tab, do a load family and browse back to say Revit 2018 and do my libraries, Imperial, it doesn't really matter what I grab. So let's grab it out of the box, MEP lighting device or several of them. So if I just load these guys in here, first thing I see is those little blips in the background. Hey, I'm upgrading something, but it's going so fast I can't really read it. So that sometimes makes end users nervous. I don't really like as a user interface to have users not sure that Revit's doing what they're supposed to be doing, or giving them some kind of a warning that they should pay attention to, that it flashes up on the screen and then they're going, uh-oh, what happened? So anybody who's new to Revit or is even older at Revit and wants to be able to use the proper content, I usually like to have all my libraries based on the actual Revit year that is being used. And occasionally I will upgrade things. I was just doing it a couple days ago and I found something that had an embedded file, probably a nested annotation family or something like that. It kept on telling me I was upgrading from 2010. I was like, that seems a little odd because it's 2018 content from my library that I've been trying to get it up to the new version. And it just kind of threw me for a loop that I was loading 2010 content, but I wasn't sure where it was coming from. So having a tool to get us there is quite nice. And inside of our CTC Tools, the BIM Batch Suite gives us that ability within that project family upgrader. Just more good stuff in here. If you guys want to see that, again, schedule a demo and we can set aside a half an hour to an hour and take a peek at that. These tools aren't extensive compared to some of the other ones in our ribbon. So I'll go ahead and move on to my next component here. So that was family upgrader. So if I go down my ribbon into my colors of tools, my dark blue tools are for BIM managers. Usually a company only has 1 to 5 seats of this typically, depending on how large it is. But usually having at least one network license that can be shared is a pretty good thing to do. On this one, I'm going to talk about the important link manager. So I'm going to essentially say I'm playing CAD cop with this tool. And usually CAD cop is kind of a bad term in most firms because that means that somebody's going to get in trouble because they did something wrong. Most of the time as a BIM manager, I've always withheld the rod, basically, not to use it as a tool to reprimand or get somebody in huge trouble, but more of an inquisitive tool. How can I find out what I need to find out fairly quickly about what's going on inside of a project? So if I look at my import and link manager on this file, it's going to pop up on a different page, so I'll move it over here shortly. I think this file is probably 600 or so megs, so it's going to take a moment for it to load. And there it is. So basically what this tool does is it gives us the ability to kind of audit what's going on inside the file very quickly. So by its own naming convention, import and link manager, this right now is showing us on the first tab all imports and all links in this file. It'll even show us the image links if you have logos and title blocks and things like that. So it gives us a huge definition of what could potentially be going wrong. If I look at all links, these are all actual links. So I've got one Revit link for the architectural background in my MEP model, and I also have one CAD link. And it actually tells me here by type. I have a CAD link, I have a Revit link. It tells me what the host view is if it's on a drafting view. It tells me what the work set is if it's model-based. If it's already been placed on a sheet or something like that, it'll tell me sheet number, referencing views, and what the actual file location is. So in most cases, the first thing I will look at, if somebody says, hey, something's wrong, or they get a manage links error every time they open the file and they really want me to look at it, the first thing I'll do is look at the link file location. And if this is not a network drive, then I know that there's probably somebody loading stuff from the wrong location. So that's one of my number one CAD cop pieces. It also has the file size embedded, which is kind of nice. If I saw a CAD file that instead of was kilobytes was 40 megabytes, maybe it's a giant like equipment file in an industrial plan or something like that, where all the industrial equipment is based on 3D CAD files, and it's got every nut and bolt and washer and everything on this giant piece of assembly. A lot of times those files can get really large, but they really slow down Revit because Revit really doesn't like those large CAD files. So in those instances, if I see somebody's CAD file is absolutely huge, we'll probably take it back to CAD and try to simplify it. And if we can't simplify it in CAD very easily, you might even export that like as an ASYS solid and then use that to turn that back into a family and then put connectors on it if it was required inside the MEP side, or if it was just a piece of equipment like a steel or cabinetry or whatever that might be. It may be a giant assembly of some sort that somebody's created, maybe an Inventor or SolidWorks, those types of things, and giving it to you as a CAD format. So a lot of times we can simplify those out. And if you know how to do that, that's a fantastic way to make that Revit file run much faster. We've actually had in a previous work equipment files that were between 50 and 80 megabytes in an industrial job. So they were linking in those CAD files. So overall, we had almost 400 megabytes of CAD files. So it's kind of a staggering number, and the files just really slowed down to a crawl. So we had to put those on separate work sets and simplify them. We got them down in the 20 to 30 megabytes each instead of 50, and then used work sets to leave them turned off if we didn't need to look at where connections or shapes were, and then just use massing elements or whatnot to show where those items were. And then if there was a rendering or something like that, we'd turn them back on and get a good view of it. So looking at my linked file locations and the file sizes can definitely help out when you're trying to diagnose an issue of people saying, hey, my file is super slow. This particular import and link manager tool is fantastic at helping figure those things out very quickly. All imports, you'll notice there's a ton of imports here. We'll go into that in just a minute. Revit links. I only have one Revit link in here, but some of the interesting things that we can take a peek at are, say, the work set. If somebody just imports them all on shared levels and grids, and then says, oh, now I'll make it into, now I'll create all my work sets I want to place them on or whatnot. Instead of having to go back and manually select them and place them, I can come back in here to work sets and actually do a change work set. So whatever line item is selected in blue, I can change it to any of the work sets that are available to me inside the project. So if somebody kind of starts sloppy and then you need to go back and fix it, that's a quick, easy way to change work sets. The insertion method, the reference type can be overlay or attach. You can also change that inside here. So that's one of those things in the Manage Links dialog box you can't do. A lot of people have to remove the link and then go back and relink it because they can't fix that otherwise. And you're getting all these redundant or looping attachments, messages when you're opening your files and stuff, because between different disciplines, they're all attached. It's kind of a mess to clean up. So here we have a tool, we can just go in and fix that. Is it pinned? That's another thing that usually is a challenge that people will either unpin it or it won't come in pinned, and then they won't ever do it, and then somebody accidentally moves it a hair, and then nothing lines up for anybody. Or that might happen across several disciplines. So if you just run this tool right during project setup, you've brought all your linked files in, you can just open this up and take a look at just your Revit links and validate whether they're all pinned or not. If they're not pinned, you can check the checkbox, and there's also a pin and unpin button here in case you do need to manage that quickly. So if you needed to move, say, all objects or all linked files because something moved permanently in architecture or something like that, everybody else has to change. You could literally come in here and unpin everything in this dialog box, make the physical move, or change the project base point or whatever that's going to be, and then go back in and repin it. And then everything should line up again at that point and be pinned back in place. So not that that's your best method. Usually I try to use the shared coordinates to manage any moves like that and have everybody on the same page without doing that. But in the case that somebody just accidentally truly screws it up, then you do have those options to come to fix all things that were broken, or just do them one at a time or whatnot. One of the other things that always gets forgotten on the MEP side is to turn the room boundings on. So architectural and sometimes structural, if you got structural walls that also are containers for rooms, being able to just hit the click box and turn room bounding on, that's another great component to that. And we can also swap and reload from. So if this was the wrong location, it should still showed my C drive, but it actually is a file that's now on the server. I could use the swap and reload and go browse out to my true location and then tell it to load that one, and my path will change here and restore the true link that I'm supposed to have. And if you were to, say, copy an entire project to a new folder because, say, it's a previous phase from 2 years ago and you're rebuilding the project from scratch now, you could go grab that entire project, put it into the new project folder, and then come in here and swap and reload from folder and repath all the files to a folder location if they were all relative. So being able to kind of save having to do all that work manually inside of Revit is a fantastic workflow. So having a copy of the BIM Manager Suite gives you this tool and a whole bunch of others that are also quite nice on the BIM Manager side. I just chose to use this one today because I'm trying to hit multiple topics within the same webinar series. So again, if you want to see those tools, the blue tools, definitely ask your sales rep and we will schedule that for you. CAD links, in this particular case, I have a CAD link and it's a drafting detail. So the only time we typically want to do that is if we want to continue to use dual platform, AutoCAD to manipulate and change my details, and Revit to place it on a sheet. Usually not the best scenario, but we can bring those links in. Sometimes we'll have DXFs that are control diagrams or one-line diagrams, things like that that get placed in a Revit file. Those are totally fine to link in, but usually what we don't want to do in most cases is ever to import a file, right? Import it and explode it. So I've done that in this particular project as well, so we can see the differences. In this case, I wanted to just show a linked one. It shows me my same basic information, file size, linked location, even gives me an element ID. So if I truly wanted to go find this object, I could jot that down and put that in my Manage tab under Select by Element ID, type in that number, hit Show, and it's going to take me right to that object. So if I don't know where it's at, it's hidden, it's not showing on a sheet, but it's supposed to be on a sheet, I could go find it immediately, figure out where it is in my browser, if it's missing or if it's been filtered out or something like that, and then come back in and place it on a sheet from there where it's actually supposed to go. So being able to utilize the dialog box and even see the element ID is another area of interest to me as well, because we can actually find things that are hidden or broken or disturbingly not supposed to be there. Say if we've got 50 of them here and we've only got 4 that are supposed to be on sheets, we can come in here and actually remove them from here instead of having to actually have all the information handy. Yeah, it's not on a sheet. Maybe we should take anything not on a sheet and just remove it. It's not being used, right? So things like that are exciting to me, that we can actually go figure these things out very quickly just by interrogating the database information that comes within this dialog box. And the last one I wanted to cover here is all imports. So when I look at all imports, I should be able to see based on the naming convention of the CAD file. If I see this oil interceptor slop tank DWG and the solids interceptor DWG, those only occur one time in here, right? So as I'm looking at these objects, I'm pretty sure that those probably haven't been exploded yet unless they only have one layer in the entire file. When they have more than one layer and they are exploded, you'll see the same exact name of the file, pump.dwg AR, 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 AR. All of that is the same file name from here to here, but they're separate imports now because the file has been exploded. And now Revit thinks that these are individual object references back to the layer names inside of Revit. So this is what can truly clutter up a file. If there's enough of them in here, usually you can eventually find out this is going to cause a file corruption at some point, and Revit's going to crash. So it doesn't happen on every job, doesn't happen on most jobs, but occasionally I'll see somebody's imported, say, 300 CAD files and exploded them all so they can edit the text on each one or whatnot, rather than linking them in, doing the fixes in AutoCAD, and then bringing them in so they can reuse. And they haven't got them in a master detail library yet for whatever reason. Either they're too new or haven't had the time to do it all. Those are services, by the way, that if you have tons of old stuff and you have no time to do it, that's something that ATG would be happy to quote you on professional services or team augmentation services to take the ones that you actually do need for Revit and make them Revit ready. It's not something I've seen us do a lot of, but it's something that I personally have done a lot of in the past. And as I might have extra time or whatnot, if that was something that somebody needed done over the course of a month or whatnot, not doing training and those hours are necessary, we can definitely take a peek at what those needs are, make a scope of work, and then show you guys that you don't have to do everything. If you can focus on making money at your billable rate and have somebody else do the tedious things that you don't actually have time for, then that's always a win for both parties as long as it's agreeable. So based on our types here, being able to see what's in the Revit model, I can definitely tell there's a bunch of these that have been exploded. What would be the easiest way to find out the whodunit? In this case, a lot of people, especially just plain Jane Revit users, not the CAD managers, they don't really know that once you find an object inside of Revit, if you can find the element ID on it and go select it, you should also be able to see who actually did whatever the last function was. So if I explode this and then somebody else comes into the same view later and says, I'm going to make a change to that piece of text or redraw the leader or something like that, that will be associated to that person who did the last change. But if you look at the entire group of objects, nobody's going to probably change the entire detail. You're going to get 95% of what you want and do a few changes. So if I just look at any of the objects in here and find the element ID, I can jot that down. So in this case, usually I'd like to be able to just highlight it and do a right click and copy. Don't think I can do that here. Doesn't look like it. So in this case, I'm going to write down 610-75499. And then I'm going to bail out of this dialog box. If I do want to have this stuff remedied and figure out a lot of it, not just one little piece, I do have the option to save report, and it will make a true Excel file. So if I were to save this under my webinars folder and hit save, then I could also go back to that same folder now under webinars and open it as Excel. And if I need an end user to go back and delete all their garbage, I can give them this report and say, hey, I know that you are responsible for bringing in this file. Go back and make that a Revit detail. Delete all your garbage and then bring that new detail back into the same drafting view that it was placed on. Then you'll have the ability to place it on a sheet. Everything's fine and we cleaned up all your junk, right? But they still need to go back into the import categories under object styles and clean that up as well. So because I'm here and I do see a field, I should just be able to come up here and do my copy from the Excel spreadsheet. I'm just going to close that. Hopefully it won't clear my clipboard when I don't save it. And if I go back into Revit, again, close my import categories and then go to my Manage tab and go find Select by ID. Do a paste. I could paste more than one in here if I want to, if I think everything's maybe on the same floor. Hit my show. It's going to say I don't have a current view open. Do you want to find one? Yes. And there is a field region arrowhead in this drafting view. So now I'm in the proper drafting view. This is just a drafting view name where I stuck 4 of them in here and I exploded them all. Usually it would just be one view, but that's basically wanted to show, now that I've come here, who actually did this? Who am I going to go beat over the head or clobber or just make them feel bad that they did something wrong for whatever reason, or go hold their hand and be very nice to them. One of those things could be applicable. I'm not going to say which one's the best. But anyway, if I go down to my my status bar down here with my scale, if I move across from my scale past the little light bulb right there, there's a kind of a spyglassy X looking thing that says work sharing display off. Most people do not know that this is even here in Revit. But if we say, who is the owner? I check on owners, and then I hover over the top of any of these objects. If I wait a moment, it's going to tell me who did it. So my current owner is none. Nobody's done any edits on it, but it was created by me, my username, Bruce Johnson, B84Y3. So if I know all my usernames of all my users in the company, I can go back and find out who done it and then go have a conversation. This is not part of our standard. This is not how we do it. You always do that, but leaving it in a CAD file and linking it so you have the ability to do any kind of edits you want, but it's not actually truly a part of the Revit database at that point. It does kind of make a copy of it in Revit, so usually I don't like that linked workflow regardless. But if you got absolutely no time whatsoever to turn it into a real Revit object, that would be the way I would do it, is to keep it in CAD. In the case that you have interns and things like that, and somebody's got time to do this, convert it, put it in your master details library after it's been approved, and then use it in projects thereafter. But because I'm within this owner's window of worksets, I can hover over any object, even any individual line segment, any field region, whatever it might be. As long as I hover for more than a second, it's going to tell me exactly who's responsible for that content. And that's possible across all Revit content. So for those who didn't know that was there, that's one of those things that needs to be viewed and rectified if people start doing this on a regular basis and everything's not cleaned up the way it should be. A lot of times you want to reuse content from old jobs that aren't in your master library, but I'd still do a kind of at least a cleanup Revit file or something like that within the project folder. Do all that cleanup work there and then place them from that file instead of your master detail library into the current project. So you get the same information, but have it cleaned up. So we're not using fonts from AutoCAD, which don't plot very well most of the time. The old field regions, the hatch patterns for the arrowheads that come from the leaders, those are individual field regions in Revit. So little things like that we want to avoid using if at all possible. Keep our drawings clean and understand how they're working, and do some mentoring for people who are not aware of what the standards should be. So that last little bit, if I go back into my visibility graphics, if I go to imported categories, then I get to see by showing my category types that each of these details that have been exploded all have the same layer names: $, rev, 0, def points, right? Detail, standard detail. This one's got M1 and M3. This one's only got M3. There's M2, 3, 4 here. So each one of these DWGs has its own new object style created off of each DWG, even though the layers are exactly the same for 80% of it. It's creating separate object styles for everyone. So even if you were going to, say, turn all the green line colors to black or something like that so they print better, you would have to do that on every single object style throughout. So that's a huge reason not to import and explode. And to way back in like 2013 Revit, to get rid of these out of object styles, you would literally have to pick one and then say delete. Do you really want to do that? Yes. So if you had 1,000 or 2,000 of these, which we had, and actually made an architectural intern go back and fix all those one day, it was like a 4-hour process to go out and click it, delete it, click it, delete it. Now in the newer versions, you can select an entire group at one time and delete them out. When you do that, the things that are on the current layers will go to the last item above. So if I were to get rid of this rev and delete it and then grab these guys here, all these items that are on these 4 would go into layer 0 under there as I delete these. So you're not really getting rid of the objects that are in there. You're just getting rid of all the categories and the old layer names and moving them up in the list. So don't be afraid of that portion of it. So, as you can see, nothing disappeared. But if I were to go find those objects on which of these imports were here, all of them would be on just their definition layer instead of what they used to be on, their drawing layer. I think that's pretty much what I wanted to show on that one. Hopefully this is answering some questions or giving you some new ideas that maybe you didn't have before. If you're an old hat doing this kind of stuff and you know it all, and maybe in my next couple pieces here, I'll be able to show you something new as well. So it's kind of why I wanted to dive into tools that a BIM manager can use. Most people that are just end users would not use the family upgrader unless they have whole groups, or maybe they downloaded a small library from a manufacturer or something like that. They might use something like that to upgrade them to the current version and stick them in a location that the IT manager or the CAD manager deems appropriate, but not necessarily in the master for whatever reason. And then after an approval process, then maybe put it where they're really supposed to go. But in most cases, I would say it's like a 50-50 split between BIM managers using the Batch Suite tools and end users. For the BIM Manager Suite, which I was just in, this is primarily BIM managers, and then I would call also power users, ones that would get into the blue tools. And as we move into the green tools, these are more user-based. These are things are going to be used more day-to-day all the time. So we like to have as many users as possible have license to those, or a network license that's shared. Whenever I start any of these tools, if it's a network license, it will automatically pull one seat. And then once that one seat is returned, or that tool is being turned off and you go back to just doing normal Revit functions, it returns that back to the pool. So if you have a firm with 50 seats of Revit, you can probably get away with around 10 to 15 seats, usually sometimes 20 if you think you're going to use a lot of the tools, so that everybody has the opportunity to use them and not have a warning that says, hey, you're out of licenses right now. That's another thing I don't like to see typically. And if you're a very large firm, we can even do an enterprise license on these where everybody in the firm gets one for a lesser cost per user than it would be for a network license or a standalone seat. So just a couple other things to consider there. So to keep it more generic, basically I want to show the Spreadsheet Link tool as the one I chose for BIM managers. There's some other things in here like the parameter jammer. If you're in charge of all your families and anything that comes in from manufacturer families, things like that, you want to fix them. That one's a must-have for anybody because you can make it work with your smart schedules in Revit. If you were still using, say, Excel schedules and not using any Revit schedules, then chances are you don't need that tool. But for those who have gone down the path of making their own schedules, I always recommend that everybody has a parameter jammer. So Spreadsheet Link. Basically what this tool is a way to expose pretty much the entire Revit database. So when we look at a screen, we look at a view, a 3D view of 3D objects, we're seeing a visual representation of the items that are in the database. Here, we're actually giving ourselves the capability of looking at anything that's in the Revit database with very few exceptions. There's some system families and things like that that I can't see in here that I found. But for the most part, almost everything's in here. I can't look at global parameters, for instance. They're not available within this tool right now. But in this case, I'm looking at all the available categories. I also have a little tool here to get me to other places. One of those would be types. So if I look at types, we have door types, wall types, duct types, and we can look at some of the properties of those and try to figure out what we can change and what we can't. We also have the ability to look at all schedules in the file. If I click on that right now, because I have almost 600 schedules in my demo project, it'll take about 5 minutes to run and show me all my schedules, so I'm not going to do that. But what I will do is come down to the bottom under categories and see something that everybody, no matter what your discipline is, might want to take a look at from the BIM Manager perspective, and that's views. So if I take views and I push it to the next category, it's going to add that name to this list, and that's going to look at all the available parameters for views and show those to me so that I can push them into the last category, which is what fills out this little spreadsheet that's going on in my background. So in this case, I already pre-made one. And again, you can actually save these settings files as well. So I have the availability to move my parameters that are available to my selected. That fills out my table, and also do sorting of views by sort by, and view filters so I can actually drill down and find just the content that I want if I see too much data at one time. So to get to my settings file, I actually saved a setting to the project, and I saved one out to a file. So I'll say that maybe I'm trying to grab the settings from a completely separate project that I was looking at maybe a couple of months ago or something like that, but I want to see exactly the same fields. Which one is it? Spreadsheet Link. So I've got a view review settings, SLS settings file. Why does that say save? Should have said open or load. There we go. Load from file. It's going to discard what settings I have on my file right now. And I'll open this up, and it's going to load everything I just had previously. So I'm not doing any filters, but sorting, I'm doing it by view name and view parameters. These are the items I'm actually looking at. So as a BIM manager, whether you are helping out in coordination toward the end when you're actually going to plot, or before you send something out, whether it's a deadline for DD, CD, 50% CD, something like that, or there's an addendum going out, I like to have something like this to take a peek at all of my views and validate that they're actually correct. So the more locked down that I have my system as a CAD manager or a BIM manager, the more I want to know that my actual view templates that have been preset to plot correctly are being utilized on all my files, or on my views. I want to make sure that my discipline and subdiscipline are correct, so it actually is categorized correctly in my browser. So I might do that originally when I set up views, and I might go occasionally recheck them throughout the project. If it was something that was a project that was finished, but it didn't go so well, maybe I'd come in here and use this for analysis and see where something might have gone wrong. So as I take a peek at these, usually I'll jump into the spreadsheet, and within the spreadsheet view, this is still inside of Revit, but it looks and feels just like Excel. So for instance, if I am looking at view templates and I've got CAD details and imports, and I'm seeing there's a -1 here. The -1 means there's no view template associated to it. Or they're also not currently on sheets, which I do have my sheet reference down here as well. So if they're not on sheets, usually I don't necessarily care. But if they are on sheets, so I browse down here to some of these electrical, fire alarm, ductwork. If I scroll over, you can see these do have sheet names and sheet numbers. But if they don't actually have a view template controlling that value, then I might want to say, I got one here that I loaded earlier called M details. So I could just do a Control-C and copy and paste. I also have the ability to hit that little black button just like in Excel and drag it down and say all those M ductworks should be M details by view template. I can also go in an upwards direction if I want to. So now all these M ductworks are going to be using that view template as soon as I hit this apply button. Apply to the active worksheet, push those back into Revit, yes. And now I've changed the view template from none to MD_details on all those views in seconds. It's just going to run through the process. Maybe it's going to take a minute instead. We'll see how long that takes. While it's doing that, I also have view scale here, so I'd probably want to dive down through my view scales and find out if there's any view scales that I didn't want. Like if I see a 1 to 100, that really better be a site plan and not a detail or an overall plan or something like that. So being able to do this checks quickly and then sort on any category or any column so that it sorts up or down. It's very easy to see some low range or none or negative numbers at the top or something like that versus the higher end number at the end, or a naming convention that doesn't work or something like that. Almost finished. Probably shouldn't have done quite so many in webinar format, but I thought it'd be a little faster than that. So we'll let it finish out and then I'll talk a little bit more. Under subdiscipline, that's also controlling stuff in our browser. As browser organization, you might have, if it was looking at sheets instead of views, it might be looking at my sheet index and making sure that there are index numbers for sheet order that also match what the architect is looking for their master sheets. So little things like that are easy to find as data and be able to sort through it and walk through it and figure out what it's supposed to be. I also have my visual styles, hidden line, course. So if some of those were messed up for whatever reason, I could go and copy and paste those into place wherever I want. If I had, say, a change in my view name, maybe I don't want this to say Navisworks. I want it to be a little bit shorter to read it easier in my browser, because maybe this is too long to say domestic flat link system. So maybe I really want it to say Nav or Navisworks instead. I highlight that column, go to data, unprotect worksheet. Now, some of these cells are kind of protected. So if I try to do like a find and replace function, sometimes it gives me some fits on that. So if I select on my edit tool, do find and replace, in this case, I'm going to try to find Navis works. And it should be case sensitive. So if I say find next, now it highlights that top one. If there were some others in the list, it probably should have found that first, depending on the column that I'm in. If I want to replace that, I'm just going to do NAV. I've already got a space dash past the Navisworks, so that should be fine. So if I do a replace once, I'm going to see if it does what I want it to do. Yes, it did. And then because I can see the group of stuff below it, then I'll do replace all after that, change them all at once, close it, and hit my apply button and send that back into the view parameters inside Revit. So I can do some massive changes on things and a lot of quick error checks on my entire project all at once, and go in and fix things that are not part of the standard fairly quickly. As long as I have another example of it, I can copy and paste, or I can drag down through my objects and tell it exactly what I want it to do. So in this particular case, I've got quite a lot of capabilities to either affect change or fix stuff that people are kind of disregarding in the models. And if you're not involved in the projects, for the most part, if you're not kind of hands-on, before changing all the view templates to the one you think is supposed to be correct, I would check with users or the PM just to say, hey, you got 57 objects that are not using view templates that are on sheets. Do you want this fixed? Or is there a reason you're not using the view template? If you're not using the view template, you could have duplicated it, made the changes, and applied those so they all do have view templates, and then I don't have to play CAD copy anymore. So things like that can make things much smoother and be better communication for all parties, and meet your standards and maintain your standards a lot faster. So this particular tool, like I said, can interrogate the entire database. So if you want to go figure out all your lighting manufacturers changed all your light fixtures from one company to another based on availability or something like that, you can go in and run the same schedule on lights. Check the parameters for any manufacturer and put in Lithonia instead of daylight, and then copy them all down in seconds, push them back into Revit and reprint the set, and your schedules all update. So tools like that are really amazing. And again, if you want to add more examples of that specific for your company, we're happy to do demos and things for you on those objects. All right, what's my time? 6 minutes left. I did want to show Hive just for a moment and talk about that. So I'm going to close this real quick and relinquish. Yes. While that's dying and my other file is reopening, I'm just going to do this fresh mech real quick and overwrite. If I go back into my files, the green tools here also have a button that's not actually in Revit. If I were to right click on a file and tell it that I want to look at this Revit properties. This gets installed in your File Explorer as the green tools are brought in. So if I pick on that, it's actually going to tell me more information about the Revit file. Main thing being the last saved path and the last version it was saved in. So if you're not sure, you get somebody else who doesn't use a naming convention as a version number in it for a file. You can go figure out what that is without having to ask them or email them because you have that tool available to you as well. All right, last piece here is the Hive. Hive CMS is a content management system. It's one giant bucket that's in the cloud, and you have a way of making libraries in that bucket and tags that will actually let you select things. So as a BIM manager, my favorite concept or thought for all this is to not only build, say, a general library for all of my content. So MEPPP is a content library of ours that was sold through CTC for the MEP engineers. So I've put a bunch of that content in this particular library. So if I select on that library, it's going to show me everything that's in that library. So I've got visual representations of all my objects. Again, that preview image can be set to show you exactly what those are. There's schedules in here, there's details in here. So my thought pattern for the BIM Manager side of this, not just being a content library alone, is also a way of doing lean templates. So if I were working with a company that has jobs that are healthcare and industrial and education, aviation, those types of things, a lot of times those industry segments will say, well, CAD Manager, make me a template just for me, because my industrial stuff is not the same as healthcare. And then if I've got a 50 or 100 meg file with all architectural objects or all mechanical objects to start from, but if I had just my industrial stuff, I'd be able to have a, say, 20 meg file to start from. So ideally at that point, this particular base model, I just opened up a mechanical template from out of the box, and it's about 9 megs total. So to add things to it, I could add this entire library of MEPPP. If I just select a group of objects at one time, I can right click and hit load, and it'll actually load all those objects into my current file, and it'll all show up in the project browser. But in this case, I want to go a little bit further and run a filter. I'm currently filtering on my MEPPP content, but my tags, I've actually gone in here and took a little stab at making my commercial template, healthcare template, industrial template. So my base, say, mechanical file might have stuff that's common across all my disciplines, already preloaded because it's always going to be used. So all my typical sheet names, numbers, things like that. But in my templates, then I might have some extra stuff that goes only towards those objects. And even though all of those objects are in the same bucket, I've added an extra tag to them. So I could find, say, my commercial template. And when I apply that, now my list gets sorted down to 12 items or something like that. So I've got a couple families, I've got 5 schedules, and I've got some details in there. So if I'm trying to use lean templates, I could use a tool such as Hive to be able to say, give me all of my data across all my disciplines that I have internally, put it all into Hive, and then sort them by library as to who gets what by user groups. So if I'm multidisciplinary, I've got a group that's architecture, architectural interiors, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and there's some groups in there where plumbing and mechanical share the same piping families and things like that. So all these components are in Hive in one big bucket, but I'm using a filter of a library name and a filter of a tag for what I'm calling my load from my template. And then as I actually select these objects, if I want all of them, I just go down to the bottom with a shift click and hit load. Instead of doing that, because it takes 3 to 4 minutes to load those at the moment, I'm just going to do a couple diffusers, near terminal, and sheet 501 that's got probably 10 details on it. If I grab those and say load, hopefully this will only take about a minute or so because I'm just about out of time. I will stay on after the recording portion of this is done for about 15 minutes or so to answer more questions. So if you do have to go, you've got a hard stop to go to another meeting or something like that, you can definitely drop off and do that. But again, I'll try to answer a few questions here as this finishes up. So as it opens each of those objects, it's not going to do a placement of the families, but it will actually open each of the schedules that are being loaded. and it'll show them in the project browser in here in a moment. I'll have to expand that out when it's done. So the only other question I've seen so far, other than somebody losing audio about 20 minutes ago, is how much information is too much information for families? I'm not sure, it's a little bit vague. How much information is too much information for families? Regarding CMS or something like that, or Hive, or just parameters in families, or based on schedules? If you want to elaborate on that, I can attempt to answer. Where's my browser at? It's not getting me my sidebar on my browser right now. Expand that out a little wider. And here I've got my schedule, my Air Terminal GRD. I've got my drafting views that came in with my sheet. All those pieces came in with just that sheet that was loaded as well. The only thing that Hive can't do that I know of right now as far as system families and or other objects, being able to import them from Hive is legends. So schedules, details, sheets, as long as the sheets don't have a model view on it, it'll bring those in as well. So if you got a blank sheet that's based on your levels and floors or whatnot, it'll do that as well. And again, we're more than happy to give you demos on each of these products. I can usually do a Hive demo in about an hour. Go over some of the main tools and the green tools in about an hour. Half an hour to an hour on BIM Manager Suite, and same thing on the Batch Suite if you guys are interested. So if you want a long day, we could do everything that we have available, but you might want to set aside 3-4 hour block to do that. But again, that's just a quick peek at the CMS for Hive. It's a content management service. It doesn't have to do just Revit content. It can also do just about any file type. So images, PDF files. If you want to make all your CAD standards and put them in PDFs and then have a library just for your CAD standards, or if you wanted to add code information and things like that, being able to store things in the cloud and have access wherever you have an internet connection compared to having to be in the office and working off of a network drive. This is a nice solution. It also has the ability to know all the paths where everything came from. So if I select on an object, it'll actually show me what libraries are associated to it, which tags are associated to it, when it was created, who put it in the library. It'll give me basic parameter information. This one's got a bunch of different types in it and all the parameters associated down below. I can check those and know that if I need a very specific version of a family, I can drag that in and know that I've got the right one rather than loading 5 or 10 different families, and one of those might be the right one. Then I've got clutter in my drawings and it's bulking up my files that make it run slower. It's kind of nice to be able to have all that information at my fingertips and be able to kind of deep dive down through there. The other things we can filter on would be the Revit categories. When it was added, specifically Revit content only versus having a visualization of all files that may be in that library. Who it was added by, who it was updated by. I can filter on all that to get exactly what I want to show up in my dialog box. And usually when I build a Hive content library, I try to put as much content as possible in first. And then as a BIM manager, start having user group meetings where I say, everybody's starting to use Hive, right? So when do you do a search and you still get 300 items instead of say 20? And then we'll add some extra tags to filter things down easier for you at that point. So rather than try to overdo my tags, I would just make sure that I have a user comment on how easy or hard it is to find what I want. And there's a search function here with an asterisk. If I were to type in air diffuser or door or casework or whatever that might be for my libraries, it's going to do a search and pull every parameter-based instance or family name that shows up with that same criteria. So if I just go back to home, so I have all libraries available and type in the word door. So I didn't find any content. I may have to be in a library first before I use that. So if I do out of the box architectural 2018, and now I say door, now I've got all my doors. So just that fast to find content. And if these were in like 5 different folders for all the doors, it would still show me all available doors because it's not segmented by file folders in Hive. It's just one big bucket. So by doing a search criteria like that, it's a way to easily find everything that you want Whereas if you hit the load family button on your insert tab, you've got to go folder by folder. So you can load 10 different items from one folder, but then you'd still have to stop and go back to the tool, do the load again, go to the other folder, grab more content. This is giving you everything that's in the bucket. So as a content load scenario, it's quite nice, but just wanted to throw that all out for you guys to see it, just a quick review of what it actually is, how it might work, and does that help you make your users get that nice warm fuzzy feeling that you're doing a really good job and giving them ways to access their content and do Revit faster and better than ever before. Got a question from Michael. Is it better to bug ATG or CTC for a crash course in Hive and helping get that configured? ATG, CTC doesn't do any of the on-site or the help desk or whatnot. ATG is responsible for all that if we sold it to you. So in those cases, just contact your sales rep and say, hey, we need help. If it's something that's a 20-minute thing that you're just missing something, that's kind of more like a help desk ticket. We do that type of stuff for free usually. And if it's something where you say, man, if we could just get 2 hours of your time to go through some setup ideas, some better ideas on how to configure tags and things like that, we can do that as a block of hours or whatnot, and then even do a follow-up where you don't even have to do the training. We could help you set it up and then walk through all of your users live on one of your machines and drive one of your boxes basically and say, here's how you do it. This is your best practices or whatnot. Maybe that would take 1 to 2 hours again. So getting up to speed on that's not all that hard. It's just a matter of, is there something not working correctly for you that we need to take and look at and see if it's doing something weird or that it shouldn't, or maybe there's a bug still in it or something like that, or is it something where you really just want, give me a block of 4 hours or 6 hours or something like that for us to help you run through the thought process of how does it work, how's it best laid out, and have somebody else to at least bounce ideas off of that has done it before. So yes, we can do all that. Looks like no more questions. Thank you guys for attending. Appreciate the questions. I'm going to stop the share and turn off for the day. Thank you.